Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo Mod Spotlights. Today we're doing part 229. So when we take a look at all these different species, and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. Today we've got a couple birds, we've got a few extinct animals, and we've got a couple subspecies to talk about, and a couple remasters as well. So I think I'm going to be quite excited to go over. But we're going to be starting off today with Eliza Planet Zoo, who has given us the ruff, which is a really cool bird here. Oh, that's not what we wanted. There we go. And did it again. There we go. Nope, and it did it for the third time. There we go. So this is the ruff. So the ruff is a very interesting little wading bird. So the male gets to about 26 to 32 centimeters and weighs between 130 to 254 grams, with a wingspan of about 54 to 58 centimeters. Sorry about that. And the female is about 20 to 25 centimeters, gets between 70 to 170 grams, has a wingspan of 48 to 52 centimeters. So extreme dimorphism. So these guys they live pretty much all over the old world. The non-breeding range is places like Africa and some parts of Asia and India and the Middle East. Even Northern Africa, and their typical breedings from basically like Finland into Russia and all those kind of places there. But these guys, what kind of makes them really distinct is these head tufts. So these head tufts, especially on the males, that are quite variably coloured. They can come in all sorts of different colours. They can come in buff, chestnut, dark purple, black, or white, and often barred or flecked with white coloration, often associated with satellite behaviours. So there's lots of different colours. So that's very, very interesting as well. So the females are kind of like your basic sort of... So this is a male here. You can see that big ruff there. See if you can spot you a female. So this is literally just a female here. Looks like a pretty typical bird. They do come in all sorts of different colours, but there's a lot of different varieties there. But typically females are much smaller than the males, and you can see they've got basically this kind of reddish or greyish colour on their body there. Just like follows the pattern of most. They've got the more drab colours on the body compared to the male. And you can see this male's got this very much, red crest going on, the black with white head tufts, so there's a lot of variety in them. There's a lot of different variation, which is very interesting. So it's kind of sad you can't fully be expressed with the variation system, but there is a lot of variation between different populations and even individuals sometimes, which is very impressive. So these guys, as I mentioned, they're found in northwest to northern Europe, through Siberia to the Chernovsky Peninsula and the Sea of Oshkosh in their breeding population. They winter from Western Europe, the Mediterranean, Sub-Saharan Africa, through the Middle East into India, Southeast Asia, and the Greater Sundas and Philippines. So quite a wide range for these birds, which is very interesting as well. So in terms of their general habitat, they tend to breed in Arctic and subarctic and temperate zones of Europe. They require habitat with adjacent feeding, licking, so that it is a place for them to perform their mating dances and nesting areas. Coastal tundra to forest tundra near small lakes, and marshes and deltas in small water margins, close to vegetation and dry mountain slope with low scrubs for lakes. In Western Europe, damp to swampy meadows is kind of what they like there. They like flooded areas, even like alkaline areas. Outside breeding season, they much prefer muddy margins of lakes, ponds, and rivers. Pretty much anywhere in those habitats they can get across their breed or non-breeding habitat, they'll go for it. So movements and migration. So they're migratory. So they chiefly winter in Africa or places such as India or some more southern parts of Europe and in the Sundas and the Philippines, and then they'll migrate as well. So autumn migration starts for about late June to early July for males, mid-July and late June, July to August for juveniles, and females about mid-July. So they'll come through there, and that's when they typically migrate, and then they migrate back August, September. The spring migration begins in March to mid-May, typically. So in terms of their diet, these guys are very much mainly eat terrestrial and aquatic invertebrates that include the adults and larvae of beetles and flies. Outside breeding season, though, much more varied. They'll feed on caddisflies, water bugs, small crustaceans, grasshoppers and mollusks, worms, frogs, and small fish. And they've also been known to eat cereals very occasionally. And they're also crepuscular or pretty much thermal, so they're out during the day and night. They're very interesting as well. In terms of breeding, they lay from early May in northwestern Europe, mid-May to Sweden, and early June in Finnmark. They're polygamous with no true pair bonds. So male mating primarily occurs at a traditional lek, where males will gather to display and the females come visit. And three types of males kind of appear in these arenas. There's the residents that have small territories, the marginals without a territory, or satellites that kind of hang around trying to find a female. It has proven impossible to correlate male plumage with female interest, so it's suggested that the diversity is useful to signal these different statuses like residents, satellites, and marginals. So it's kind of how they decide that. So that diversity can signal individual identity, as a species does not sing. So instead of singing or using sounds, these guides rely a lot more on their visual feathers to display themselves. So they breed in leks, which is basically almost like a little concert where they all come and perform together to try and get a female. And there are males that sometimes have a female-like morph that is used as it's a strategy that's used by a lot of animals called sexual mimicry, where they basically pretend to be a female to get close to the females and then mate with the female, which is very interesting as well. So they nest either solitary or in semi-colonial areas, and densities from about 0.1 to 2.5 nests a hectare, occasionally only several meters apart, and sometimes never lack. They're non-terrestrial. Their nests are concealed in marsh plants or meadow grasses, shallow scrapes lined with grass, leaves, or stems, and they clutch about 4 eggs, sometimes 3. They're laid in a 24 to 36 hour interval, and incubation is about 20 to 33 days, starting with the last egg, and brooded is really only by the female. With the chicks, as you can kind of see, the chicks almost like an orangey yellow colour. They're very, very cute, of course. Let's see if we can spot you over there. So he is swimming, but he is very cute. Cute little guy. And their undersides are entirely buff, and they fledge at about 25 to 28 days, with females leaving the chicks for some days before fledging. And hatchling success is actually 93%. And age first breeding is 2 years, possibly later in males. And the oldest bird ever banded was about 10 years old when it died. In terms of their conservation status, they're actually considered doing pretty well. They are considered least concern. Not going to be threatened. The population is thought to be over 2 million birds, with numbers declining in some areas, like in Western Africa wintering sites, and some breeding ranges constricted. Some areas they have been declining, but overall they have been doing good, and even their subpopulations, such as the ones in Eastern Russia and small British populations, have actually been increasing. So they seem to be doing well on the whole. With 2 million birds, that's a pretty good increase. It's a pretty good number of them. Anyway, that was Donald Eyes Planet Zoo. Next up, we have got the Swinhoe's Pheasant, done by Great Cakes Mods. If you don't love a mod done by Great Cakes Mods, so let's have a look here. So this is the Swinhoe's Pheasant. So the Swinhoe's Pheasant is very interesting. They've got very extreme sexual dimorphism. So this is a male here. So males get to about 79 centimeters, with the tail being about 41 to 50 centimeters, and the females about 50 centimeters, with the tail being 22 centimeters. And they are just under 1,100 grams on average. Males, you can see, are mostly black, with this glossy green feathers, fringes and upper coverts, and snowy white crest. They've also got bright red wattles and facial skin, and very interesting colours. So you can see that's the male there, and there's the female. So she lacks a lot of these bright colours, but they can be quite variable. They're usually chestnut or reddish brown in colour, in underparts. The diagnostic is you can tell them from other species by like reddish the tail and stuff like that. The bare parts become yellowish but become blackish at the base. That tends to happen a lot more on females as well. So you can see that's a female and male, direct comparison. First year males resemble adult males but are duller, and then they're partly molted. So adult plumage is typically found or typically attained in their second year of life, typically. So there's no other subspecies of these guys, but they're typically found in Taiwan, and they inhabit both primary and mature secondary hardwood forests with dense undergrowth. They can be up to about 300 meters above sea level to 2,000 meters, and presumably as high as 2,300 meters. So it's quite impressive. In terms of their diet and foraging, they have a very wide variety of diets or stuff that they eat. They'll eat acorns, berries, flower buds, leaves, and other plant materials, also earthworms and millipedes and termites and other insects, so quite a variety there. So they do like a wide variety of plant and insect species that they probably use by, for getting extra protein. So foraging seems to appear in the early morning or late afternoon, typically around road edges in ground cover, but they also use a lot of areas where they will kind of remain inside the forest more during the wet season. And they feed by digging as well as slow walking and pecking through these little areas here. But then mostly pretty silent birds. We'll actually have a look at the female because we've already had a good look at the male. Female. They're actually pretty silent birds, but they do have make a rather high sucking sound and a plaintive oot 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 kind of sound going on there. Forgive my impersonation. But then let's talk about the breeding. So breeding for these guys typically occurs in this is very cute. Peak laying is about March to May, usually in February, but sometimes reports as late as October. The mating system is not certainly known. Polygamy is suspected, but pairs have been frequently seen together, so it could be either or. Nest data is scarce, but indicate that eggs are laid near the floor of a tree or under rocks or on bare earth or on a few fallen leaves, but nests of grass lined with leaf and feathers have also been recently reported. They typically have a clutch of about 4 to 8 eggs that are reddish to cream buff colours. And the incubation and captivity is about 25 days and they're incubated by the female alone, with the chicks having chocolate brown down above the whitish and rufous below, with orange rufous crowns. So you can kind of see that going on there. So in terms of conservation status, they're not doing quite as well as the rough bird. These guys are near threatened. So they're not globally threatened, but they're considered near threatened, previously classed as vulnerable, so they're actually a little bit safer. But due to these guys being quite secretive, and other species in the same kind of sort of genus, population estimates are difficult to make with any certain degree of confidence. Intensive field work in the 1970s suggests the population may be between 5 to 10,000, though more recently they've been estimated to be about 3 to 7,000 as well. Has become extinct in several areas. And numbers have reduced in a lot of areas due to things like various pressures such as habitat loss and hunting, but also being trapped for the bird trade. So they may be doing well where they're protected, but they may be declining outside of these protected areas. Yeah, very, very cool species, and nice to see another Great Cakes mods. So we're going to be on for the next one. We've got another Great Cakes mods. How can you not love a good Great Cakes mod? We're going to have some extinct animals now. This is Hieracrodon nebraskarensis. So this is not anything related to Hyrax. So this is a pretty cool animal though. So Hieracrodon is Hyrax tooth is what it means. As an extinct genus of perissodactyl mammals, so related to horses, tapirs and rhinos, from the White River Formation. So these guys are kind of a lightly built pony-like mammal that are about 5 feet or 1.5 meters in length and has quite a large skull in comparison to the rest of its body. So Hieracrodon is much smaller than modern rhinos and differs very little in appearance from primitive horses, so it's kind of hard to tell if it's a primitive horse or a rhino. But it has short, broad snout and long, slender legs, so you can see the 3 digits there as well. So it looks very superficially horse-like, but not quite. Very weird animal. When you put it next to, though, Mesohippus, which is believed to be a true horse, it has a longer neck with robust vertebrae, and compared to earlier Hieracrodontids from the Uinta Formation, like Trolleops, Hieracrodon is more gracile. The median toe, or the middle toe, was enlarged, while the lateral toes are greatly reduced. And the molars of Hieracrodon are actually very similar to what you see in a modern rhino, with the last upper molar assuming the triangular shape. The canines and incisors, however, were quite different. In form, the anterior teeth of a Hieracrodon, or the back teeth, were small and similar in shape, being pointed and curved. And like primitive horses, Hieracrodonts inhabited open forests and wooded steppes, and they turned from browsing foliage to grazing grass. And they died out without leaving descendants, which marked the end of the phylogenetic branch of these hornless running rhinos. So basically the horse rhinos. So they get the name Hieracrodon because they have teeth that are very similar to Hyraxes, which are Aphrotheres, not closely related to these guys at all. Great example of convergent evolution. And looking actually into a specimen of these guys, Hieracrodon nebraskarensis from Chihuahua, showed that it mainly fed on C3 plants located near bodies of water, based on things. But dental, my mesoware and microware also performed, but they were found to be unstable. So these C3 plants means a lot of browsing, but it could also be because it's near a water body. That could also impact the results of that as well. But yeah, really, really cool. I love these guys. Let's have a quick look at the Zoopedia and see if we can get any other cool information. They die out in descendants. Yeah, we mentioned that. The Miocene, starting back in the Eocene landscape, was changing from large expanses of forest to grassland. That's why they partly declined. You know, they were more adapted to forests. But yeah, really, really cool. Another Great Cakes mod. We're going to have a look at another one here. So let's have a look at... This time we're going to have a look at a genus of bear dog. This is Amnitocyon. So let's have a look at you. Quite a pretty one there. Look at you. So these guys are a genus of large-sized carnivorous mammal belonging to the bear dogs and lives in the late Miocene of Spain. It is quite noticeable for its extreme adaptations towards hypercarnivory, its robust skeleton, and actually being one of the last surviving members of the group. So this group, Amnitocyon, was discovered in the year 2021 by Morales et al. Based on comparative complete remains originally referred to the genus the Mutocyon, which actually provides a great understanding of that group in general, which was actually only known from fragmentary material. So this animal is known from quite a bit of material, and the name Amnitocyon comes from Amut, who is an ancient Egyptian goddess, chosen as her mix of crocodile, hippopotamus, and lion features, kind of reminded the authors of the fossil. And Amnitocyon basically means the Admut dog, and Kainos, its scientific name, means derives from ancient Crete of a new kind. So a new kind of Amut dog is their name. So far it's only found in Madrid in the Serra de los Balenos formation, which dates to about 9 million years ago, which is actually quite late for a bear dog, hence being the last surviving member. Its formation itself has a complex of cavities and held water even in harsh droughts, and they trapped herbivores in there to drink, and then a lot of carnivores would come in there to feed on them and then get stuck themselves. So very interesting. These guys were lion-sized taxa, so they were believed to be about 231 kilos, and is characterized by its extremely robust build with powerful legs, almost unmatched around caniforms, and adaptations for hypercarnivory. So its chin and muzzle was sturdy, and its snout was quite huge, as you can see there. So comparing it to other kind of bear dogs, it is quite a bigger and bulkier. So I don't think it's the biggest, but it's definitely one of the most robust of them all. It's actually compared to things like bears comparable, which is very weird as well. So these guys would have had very interesting teeth. So it is known pretty well. But the group itself that it's found in, it is related to things like Inocerotherium, Gesonidium, Castrodea, and Intermedia. So a very interesting group of animals, and within the bear dogs, which is the most famous example you'd think is Amphicyon and stuff like that. So these guys are very, very weird. So in terms of pathology, they had many traits found in other carnivorans, with some actually being quite exclusive to this genus. So these guys had quite narrow insertions of the masseter muscle, which may be a sign they may have been quite good at slicing rather than chewing food. And a biomechanical analysis actually looked at them, and they occupied a morphospace, or a space in the ecosystem, actually not known to any other Amphicyon, canid, or carnivoran. So these guys may have been quite interesting, and actually they showed a lot of overlap with pinnipeds, moving their heads to side motion. So they were even well adapted to more like cutting and eating on soft things rather than hard things. And the postcranial skeleton has not been closely described, but it's said to be robust, even exceeding bears, and very similar to things like Thylacolesmilis. So, but other bones showing features to cursorial mammals. So these guys would have been kind of not walked in a digigrade position, as the surface area would be too small. So they're often plantigrade. They often lead to some discrepancies. So it's kind of hard to decide whether it probably would be a semi-plantigrade. Those do exist. So yeah, but very, very interesting. So the habitat this animal lived in, it was kind of been restructured as a C3 woodland with patches of grassland. It did live with a lot of very interesting animals, especially other large animals such as the somewhat smaller bear dog Megroscion and the ursid or bear Eniarchtos octoedes, and also Macarodus. You guys are familiar with that. Other sort of saber-toothed like Promegaterion, also the Mustelin Eomelivora, you heard of that one, and some little smaller felids, and some hyenids and some other mustelids and stuff. The most common herbivore in the area that probably would have been prey would have been Hipparion, antelope Astroportax, the monchid Micromeryx, and some bovids, also some intermediate rhinos, lots of rodents and lagomorphs within the mammal fauna, and also a relative of the sea eagle, Hylectus, some species of monitor lizard, and actually a giant tortoise, Titanocephalon. So very interesting as well. And among the 4 very large carnivorans, these guys were all likely solitary hunters. Only Megaceron would have differed slightly in preferring to hunt in open woodland and commonly consumed a Proteryx. Well, these guys would have likely fed on Hipparion and other large animals in those open ranges as well. So, judging by all those large predators, there must have been quite a high biomass in the formation at the time. So very, very interesting there. Another great cakes mod, Do love a great cakes. Okay, so let's carry on. Next up, we've got Sky Polaris, who's given us the mountain gorilla. So let's have a look at these guys here. The mountain gorilla. So the mountain gorilla, or mountain gorilla beringi is one of the 2 subspecies of the eastern gorilla. And there are 2 populations. There's one population that lives in the Virunga Mountains in southwestern Uganda. And there's also in one of the eastern population that lives in the Bwindi Independence National Park in Uganda as well. So there's kind of 2 different isolated populations. And as of 2019, the population has just entered to cross 1,000. So they are considered quite endangered. So very similar to other apes and gorillas. They split from us probably about 30 million years ago. Would evolved into gorillas, would have split from the common ancestors about 12 million years ago. And then the taxonomy of these guys has kind of been well over the way. So there used to be one gorilla with 2 subspecies, with 3 subspecies. Now there's the eastern gorilla, which is gorilla. I mean, is this the eastern gorilla? I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, the eastern gorilla is Gorilla beringi, and the western gorilla is just gorilla, with 2 different subspecies in each. So characteristics, compared to other gorillas, these guys have actually the fur is often a lot thicker and longer than other gorilla species since they live in colder temperatures. Males reach a standing height from about 1.6 to 1.7 meters, or about 5 feet tall, 5'6", and a girth of 1.3 to 1.6 meters, or 4.5 to 5.3, with an arm span of about 2 to 2.7 meters, or 6 to 9 feet, and weigh between 220 to 191 kilograms, with 265 to 241 kilograms, with the females being smaller on average, about 70-98 kilograms. So they're quite big. They're smaller than the eastern lowland gorilla, which is the other subspecies, but adult males tend to have a more prominent bony crest. Very similar, they've got those big things there. And they get the name the silverback, because they've got the silver grey on them. This is a female. We'll have a look at the male here. He looks like he's having a good sleep. Not too different in that regard from other gorillas. They're terrestrial, but they will climb to find food. They knuckle walk, and most regards they're not that different from other gorillas. The mountain gorillas itself, as they love to live in montane cloud forests, between 2,200 and 4,300 meters up the slopes typically now they're living in dormant volcanoes. Their vegetation is very dense at the bottom of these mountains and becomes more sparse at the higher elevations, and they occasionally come down to these border habitats, which is quite interesting as well. So the home range used by one group of gorilla during 1 year is dependent on food sources and stuff like that, and they've identified different zones where they'll often like to hang out, and they'll often come in and out year round. So they're primarily herbivores, feeding on leaves, shoots, stems, and piths of about 150 different species of plants. They'll also eat fungi, galls, and stuff like that as well. So it's very interesting. An adult gorilla will eat about 20 kilograms of food a day, with a female eating about 14, which is quite impressive. They're highly social, just like other gorilla populations or other species. They live in relatively stable groups held together by long-term bonds. So what will happen is typically they'll consist of one male and a number of females, though some groups have more than one male. The remaining gorillas are either lone males or exclusively male groups, made up of a mature male and some younger males. Groups vary in size from about 5 to 30, with few individuals being at 10 on average, with one dominant silverback who's the undisputed leader, typically another subordinate silverback who's usually the younger brother, half-brother, or even adult son of the dominant silverback, one or two blackbacks who act as sentries, 3 or 4 sexually mature females who are bonded for life to dominant silverback, and those about 3 to 6 infants. That's typical dynamics of a group. So most males and approximately about 60% of females will leave their natal group or the group they were born into. Many leave at about 11 years old, and often the separation is slow. They'll kind of, start to spend more time away, and then eventually they'll just cut off. So it's not like, oh my god, we got to go move. It's very much a slow process. And then females will typically immigrate when they're about 8 years old, transferring to another group or beginning a new one with a lone male. So it kind of works out there. The dominant gorilla, though, he kind of decides the movements of the group. He mediates conflict within the group, and when the group is attacked by humans, leopards, or other gorillas, the silverback's responsibility is to protect them, even at the cost of his own life. He is a center of attention during rest sessions, and young gorillas frequently stay close to him and include him in their games. But if a mother dies or leaves the group, the silverback is usually the one who looks after her abandoned offspring, even allowing him to sleep in their nest. So they're quite good dads. I do love silverback gorillas. When a silverback dies of disease, accidents, or poachings, the family group is disrupted. Unless there is an accepted male descendant capable of taking over the position, the group either split up or adopt an unrelated male. And then when a new family silverback joins the family, he may kill all the offspring of the dead silverback. But this infanticide has not been analyzed in these groups. But mountain gorillas seem to have indicate a recent decline in their population size led to excessive inbreeding. So there's believed to be a lot of inbreeding within mountain gorillas at the moment. So in terms of aggression, even though they're strong and powerful, they're actually quite shy and really gentle animals. They do, have rituals as well. They'll beat their chest, they're hooting, they'll symbiotic feeding, they'll rise, chest beat with the cup hands, kicks, and then eventually they'll thump the ground. They've got like a 9-step kind of sequence of ritualized display to other gorillas to kind of get them, And assimilation, so typically grooming happens around midday, and that's when they rest, and young gorillas often like to hang around a lot more. They're more arboreal, so they tend to climb around and learn things as well. So that's quite interesting. In terms of research, there's been a lot of research into these gorillas. There's like Diane Fossey, who began an 18-year study on these gorillas and became a very active conservationist to protect these gorillas, even at the cost potentially of her own life as well. But in terms of conservation, as of 2018, they are listed as endangered, but there's believed to be more than 1,000 of them left. So the most recent sort of consensus shows that they are actually improving, and that's because of the effort that we're putting into them. They are protected. But the biggest threats they face are things like poaching and habitat loss. So a lot of their habitat loss is due to agriculture, so they turn their slash and burn agriculture, logging and stuff like that. That's a really big thing that's caused them to decline and reduce their habitat. Even though they're not hunted for bushmeat, they are kind of maimed or killed in snares. They abduct infants for the pet trade, which is really sad as well. And often disease can be a big thing as well. So getting too close to them because humans and gorillas are very similar genetically, they can share a lot of diseases. So humans going up there can actually spread diseases to the population. But also another big thing is civil unrest in these areas with issues such as political areas. So that's hard to make areas to protect for gorillas when there's a war breaking out. So that can be big issues for the gorillas as well. Gorillas have been killed by stepping on mines and stuff like that, and all of those protections break down when there's civil unrest. But yeah, very, very cool. Nice male gorilla. Really, really cool. So next up, we're back to Great Cakes Mod, who's made another really, really cool mod here. We've got the Malayan tiger. So let's have a look at these guys here. Looks absolutely beautiful. So we've got the Malayan tiger. So the Malayan tiger is a specific population of the mainland kind of tiger, Panthera tigris. It's native to the Malay Peninsula, and it's been classified as critically endangered. And as of 2014, there was believed to be only about 80 to 120 mature individuals left. So in terms of naming, it was originally named Panthera Tigris jacksoni, and was originally considered its own subspecies, but now, as part of some new revisions of taxonomy, it's thought to be one of the mainland, just the mainland subspecies. But they do seem quite distinct, and there is support for the 6 subspecies concept. So these guys are likely, they're kind of quite distinct as well. So in terms of characteristics, there's not really many clear differences between Malayan and Indo-Chinese tigers, where the specimens of the two regions are quite comparable. They do seem to be smaller than Bengal tigers, and measurements suggest they get up to about 8 feet 6 or 250 centimeters in males, and about 239 or 7 feet 10 for females. Just kind of their sizes generally. And they have a body weight of between 104 to 284 kilograms, or 284 pounds, and about 42 to 129 kilos. So not quite as big as some of those Bengals, but they do still get quite large, 130 kilos, bigger than a Sumatran. So the geographic distinction between Malayan and Indo-Chinese tigers isn't clear, because it is contiguous. Tigers actually abandoned on the Singapore Islands in the 1830s. Bounders were quite common there, then they were hunted, and all that stuff. In Malaysia, though, there were reports of early succession vegetation fields harbouring tigers, and there was some evidence of tigers around there. So they seem to be doing okay. Populations have suggested that 2019 there has been pollution and deletion of prey to cause the decline up to 60% over the 7-8 years. So the population has gone down from 60 to 23, so they're very rare, this population of tigers. Very tragic. But in terms of behaviour, very similar to other species. They'll feed on sambar deer and all sorts of deer and stuff like that. Their ecology is pretty much the same as a typical tiger, but the main threats has become habitat fragmentation, especially around that area with palm oil plantations, and commercial poaching has always kind of been a threat, but in Malaysia there's been a substantial market as well, and sometimes snares and stuff set them up to hurt them. But the tiger is, protected in trade and stuff, and zoos do have Malayan tigers to try and accommodate them and release them to the wild. And ban on deer hunting has actually helped as well to try and reboost their populations, because people do like tigers at the end of the day. How can you not love a good cougar? And you look very, very cute. And I'm going to have a look at the baby. Look at the baby. A very cute baby. Anyway, so last but certainly not least, this is an animal that we've covered before, but it got a remaster. So this is by Gaboy, Genora Pizza, and Havoc1199. This is the Asiatic lion. So the Asiatic lion belongs to the subspecies Pantherelio leo, very similar to the same one as the Barbary lion. So a phylogenetic analysis shows that the Asiatic lion is closely related to North and West African lions. So adult males typically measure up to 120 centimeters or 47 inches at the shoulder and weigh about 160 kilograms or 530 pounds, making them slightly smaller than large African lions, but similar in size to Central African populations. So the Asiatic lion has typically like a ruddy, tawny to sandy grey fur, a distinctive longitudinal fold along its belly, as you can kind of see there, and a larger tough tail. The males are distinguishable from the females to the appearance of a mane, but in the Asiatic lion, these manes tend to be quite a bit smaller and sparser than their African counterparts. They also do differ from the African lion in skull structure, having a stronger sagittal crest and some other small features as well. So the first scientific description of these lions was published in 1826, based on specimen in Persia, but until the 19th century it ranged from Saudi Arabia into Turkey, Iran, and into even southern Pakistan and central India. But sadly today they're only found in the Gir National Park and the surrounding areas in western India, where the Indian population was numbering about 411 individuals by 2010. It has now increased as of 2025. There's believed to be about 891 lions in that area. And since the 1990s, due to increase in the population, about a third has moved into residential areas, and the conflict between the lions and their residents of these areas has increased quite a bit. And you can see that lovely remaster. Gaboy always does a really good job. Even the original one was amazing, but really knocked it out of the park with this one. So, as I mentioned before, these were the first lions to leave Africa. One of the first lions was, Panthera splaya, which later evolved into them. Phytocetus displaya. These guys are related to North African lions. And Asiatic lions are less genetically diverse than African lions, which makes sense. There are only one population left as well. You see the manes, and there's some reports of exceptionally sized male lions, but people like to exaggerate sizes. So the Gir Forest today is really small. It covers an area of about 1,400 square kilometres and is declared the sanctuary and the only living place where you can find these lions today. But the lion population has rebounded, though historically they would have lived pretty much from southeastern Europe into Arabia and the Zagros Mountains and into India as well, so quite a wide range. Mesopotamia, and the Greeks would have talked about lions, so they would have lived up there too. One of the main differences between African and Asian lions, or Asiatic lions, these guys are more solitary or associate in groups up to 3 males. They tend to have looser pride structures, with pairs of males resting, hunting, and feeding together and do marking behaviours, but females associate with up to 12 other females, having a stronger pride together with their cubs. And females and males usually associate only a few days with mating, but actually rarely live or feed together, so they tend to be a little bit more keep to themselves. Their home ranges typically ranges from 144 to 230 kilometers squared during the dry and wet seasons, but it does vary depending on the area and stuff like that. They tend to also be more active in twilight and at night, with studies of captive lions so that they spend most time during the day lying down to be inactive, and that's when more active at night. In general, their kind of prey, they seem to prefer things like chital, nilgai, sambar, and wild boar. And in some areas, outside of particular areas where wild prey species do not occur, they'll eat water buffalo and domestic cattle, which also puts them, talking with people, brings them into risk of going near people. So in 1974, the Gir forest was quite depleted in terms of ungulate populations, and the lions were obviously relying on people's, their livestock. But now the populations, there's been a lot more natural prey in the forest now, which has allowed these guys to bounce back. It means there's less attacking of livestock, because they want to avoid people when they can. So we'll have a look at the baby and talk a little bit about... let's have a look at you, you're very cute. A little bit about their reproduction. They typically mate foremost from October to November, with mating lasting 3 to 6 days. Gestation is about 110 days, and litters can bear about 1 to 4 cubs. The average interval between births is about 24 months, unless cubs die due to infanticide or by injuries. Cubs become independent about 2 years old, with sub-adult males leaving their natal pride latest at the age of 3, and become nomads until they establish their own territory. So that's quite interesting as well. So in terms of the threats of the Asiatic lion, the main threats is, since they only exist in one population, if there was a big forest fire or an epidemic, they could easily be wiped out. There has been incidents of poaching, as well as some being drowning as they fell into wells. But most of the biggest threats at the moment is conflict with humans, as people have been... There was a lion that actually in 2012 dragged a man from his house and killed him in the Gir National Forest. So those issues, obviously people don't want to live with animals that can kill them. So trying to fix those sort of issues are very important. But there is some also issues in conservation. So there have been, since the 1950s, there's people really trying to create another population of lions outside of the Gir National Forest, and a lot of that has been politics. So there's been the Asiatic Lion Reintroduction Project has found sites and stuff they want to reintroduce lions. But the Gujarat state actually kind of wants to keep the lions, because if any of the lions definitely, go out, that means the lions, they'll lose the status as the world's only home for these lions. So they rejected a number of these proposals. But they ordered that some of these lions do have to be sent to another place so they can actually save. Because remember, they're only one population. The only reason they want to keep them in Gir, so they're the only place that you can see them. They're the only population, so it's like a notch on their cap. But if anything happens to those lions, there's risk of going extinct. And now they're getting too much for the Gir forest, and they're spreading out to the local areas next door, and are starting to attack people. So there needs to be other wild areas that they need to send them to. And there has been potential talking about sending them to Iran, and there is some captive populations of Asiatic lions. But it's really hard to tell which one's pure and stuff like that, because, they've all, especially for circuses, a lot of them have interbred and stuff like that, so you can't really find them 100% together. But they've been very important in cultures all across Europe and Western Asia. They've been mentioned in the Bible. The Lion of Babylon. There's also in the Bronze Age, the Nemean lion was mentioned in Greek mythology. Lots of Hindu stuff as well. So they're very important in those sort of cultures. But yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really love this lion. I think it's really awesome. I love we talk about the Asiatic lion. But yes, I think this is a good place to finish. So I'm gonna zoom out. So yeah, I'm going to thank everyone. Thank you, Elijah, for the rough. Thank you, Gaboy and General Pizza and Havoc for your remaster of the American Lion. Really cool. Thank you, Sky Polaris, for your mountain gorilla. And thank you, Great Cakes, for your pheasant, your Hanacrodon, your Amatocyon, and the Malayan tiger. So you did a really good job there. So, yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.